The announcement happened without warning in a packed boardroom on a Tuesday morning. My boss, Walter Crane, stood at the front wearing his corporate smile. "I'm pleased to introduce Parker Crane, who'll be leading our operations department moving forward." Parker stood beside him, mid-20s, expensive suit, confident handshake. Walter gestured toward me in the third row. "Graham has been instrumental in building our foundation, and I know he'll provide excellent support during this transition." People clapped. Polite, corporate applause. I sat completely still, hands folded, watching this unfold like it was happening to someone else. My role wasn't being eliminated. It was being handed to Walter's nephew, right in front of me. No private conversation. No explanation. Just a public announcement treating me like support staff. Parker talked about fresh perspectives and innovative approaches. Words that meant nothing, delivered with unearned confidence. I looked around. Colleagues I'd trained for years suddenly found their notebooks fascinating. Nobody met my eyes. The meeting continued another 20 minutes. Strategic priorities. Organizational alignment. Corporate language designed to make nepotism sound like planning. When it ended, people filed out quickly, avoiding me like failure was contagious. I stayed seated while the room emptied, reality sinking in slowly. I sat frozen while others gathered their materials and left quickly. 18 years. I'd spent 18 years building this department from chaos into something functional. I'd absorbed 3 roles during the recession when the company couldn't afford replacements. I'd trained every manager currently working in operations. I'd fixed systems at midnight that nobody else understood. And Walter had just handed my job to a kid whose primary qualification was sharing his last name. Not a layoff. Not a restructuring. A replacement. My phone buzzed. Email from Walter. "Please see me when you have a moment." The weight of it hit me fully. My role hadn't been eliminated. It had been transferred. To someone unqualified. In front of everyone. Without warning. The humiliation was designed into the process. Public announcement before private conversation. Applause for decisive leadership. My 18 years reduced to support during transition. I stood slowly and walked toward Walter's office. The hallway felt different now. Smaller. Like the building itself had shrunk. Several colleagues glanced at me, then quickly away. They knew. Everyone knew. And nobody had warned me. Walter's door was open. He waved me in, already talking before I sat down. "Graham, I know this is a change, but it's strategic for the organization. Parker brings fresh energy and perspective we need." "You didn't mention this was happening," I said quietly. "I wanted to handle it professionally. Clean transition, no drama." Professional would have been a private conversation first. His expression tightened. "Look, this decision came from above me. But I need you to be a team player here. Parker needs support settling in, and you're the best person to provide it. So I train my replacement. You help transition leadership. If you approach this cooperatively, there's a future for you here. If you make this difficult..." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. The threat was clear. Cooperate or leave. Be a team player or be replaced completely. I'd given this company 18 years of loyalty. And Walter was telling me my future depended on how gracefully I accepted being pushed aside for his nephew. "I understand," I said finally. "Good. I knew you'd see reason." I left his office without another word. But something had changed inside me. Not anger exactly. Something colder. Clarity. The drive home took 40 minutes through rush hour traffic. I barely registered any of it. My hands gripped the steering wheel while my mind replayed the meeting on loop. 18 years of loyalty reduced to a footnote because blood ties mattered more than competence. I joined during massive layoffs when the company was bleeding talent. Operations was a disaster. Missed shipments, inventory errors, furious clients. They'd hired me as a coordinator. Within 6 months I was managing everything because nobody else could. I'd worked 70-hour weeks debugging systems, training new hires, implementing processes that actually worked. I'd absorbed responsibilities from 3 laid-off managers and never asked for additional compensation because the company was struggling. I'd become the person everyone called when things broke quietly. The one who fixed problems before they became crises. And Walter had erased all of it in a 5-minute announcement. My wife Claire was in the kitchen when I got home. She took one look at my face and put down her coffee. What happened? I told her everything. She listened without interrupting. 18 years, and they did this in public? Blood ties matter more than competence. What are you going to do? I stared out the window. I don't know yet, but something was already forming. Not anger. Something more precise. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about my early years. Joining during layoffs when everyone was terrified. The operations department was chaos. 3 managers had been let go. Nobody knew who was responsible for what. I'd absorbed everything. Inventory management. Logistics coordination. Client relationships. Quality control. I'd worked until midnight most nights those first 2 years. Building systems from scratch. Training whoever was left. Making it work because someone had to. I remembered the Westfield crisis. Major client threatening to leave over repeated shipping errors. I'd spent a weekend rebuilding our entire fulfillment process, then personally called their procurement director to walk through every change. We kept the contract. Today it was worth $12 million annually. Parker had probably never heard of Westfield. I got up at 2 in the morning and went to my home office. Pulled out files from my early years. Photos from the distribution center when we used paper tracking. Original process documentation I'd written by hand. Performance reviews marked exceeds expectations and critical to operations. A handwritten note from the previous CEO thanking me for saving the Westfield contract through exceptional problem solving. I'd built this department. Every system. Every process. Every relationship. And Walter thought he could hand it to his nephew like it was nothing. The next morning I thought about all the people I'd mentored. Helena from logistics, who I'd guided through her first management role. She'd called me panicking during her first crisis. I'd talked her through it step by step, then helped her document lessons learned. Travis in inventory, who'd made a catastrophic ordering error his second month. Instead of firing him, I'd shown him how to catch mistakes before they compounded, then promoted him a year later. Denise in shipping, who I'd recommended for promotion twice. She'd told me I was the best boss she'd ever had. All of them had sat in that boardroom yesterday. Silent. Watching me get replaced. Not one had spoken up. I understood why. They had mortgages. Families. Fear. But understanding didn't make it hurt less. I'd given 18 years to this company. I'd trained half the department personally. I'd built systems that kept everything running. And when the moment came, nobody defended me. Not even the people who owed their careers to my mentorship. That silence told me everything I needed to know about corporate loyalty. It flowed upward, never down. I'd been naive to expect different. Parker started immediately. He appeared at my desk at 8:15, tablet in hand, confident smile. Hey Graham, got a minute? He sat without waiting for an answer. I'm getting up to speed. Can you walk me through priority shipping requests? I pulled up documentation. Standard process is outlined here. Requests go through approval queue, get flagged, route to expedited fulfillment. Right, but what about VIP clients who call directly? They're directed to submit through official channels. He frowned. Walter mentioned you handle VIP clients personally sometimes. How does that work? That was the informal system. The one I'd built through years of relationship building. The one that relied on judgment and trust. Those are exception cases based on specific client relationships. Can you show me which situations qualify? It's not a checklist. It requires understanding client history and business impact. So it's just instinct. It's experience, I corrected. We spent an hour with me explaining processes that made sense on paper but missed nuanced reality. Parker took notes, but I saw confusion building. He'd expected simple procedures. He was discovering operations ran on complexity built over 18 years. When he left, I realized something. I described my job accurately without teaching him how to do it. The difference mattered. Later that day, Walter stopped by my desk. "How's it going with Parker?" "He's asking good questions. I need you to really help him settle in, Graham. Get him up to speed quickly. I'm providing information as he requests it." Walter's expression tightened. "I need more than that. Active support. This transition needs to be smooth." "I'm being cooperative." "Be more cooperative. This is temporary if you work with me." There it was again. The carrot and stick. Help Parker succeed, and maybe I'd have a future. Resist, and I'd be gone completely. "I understand," I said. After he left, I sat thinking about that word. Temporary. What did that mean? Temporary support until Parker was trained? Temporary reporting structure until I was pushed out entirely? Walter hadn't specified. He'd left it vague intentionally, keeping me uncertain. Compliant. I pulled up my employee file that night and reviewed policies I'd never paid attention to before. Leadership transition requirements. Performance milestones. Certification protocols. And I found something interesting. Very interesting. Parker's appointment wasn't as final as Walter had made it seem. Leadership accountability policies required new department heads to meet documented performance milestones within 90 days. Those milestones included sign-offs from multiple departments confirming competency in core operational areas. The sign-offs weren't automatic. They required demonstrated capability. And they came from people I'd worked with for years. Helena in logistics. Travis in inventory. Denise in shipping. For others across different functions. All people I'd trained personally. All people who understood the difference between confidence and competence. The policy also specified that during the transition period, certain authorities remained with the previous role holder until formal transfer was certified. Walter had announced Parker as department head, but he hadn't completed the formal transfer process. The announcement wasn't the same as actual authority transfer. That required documentation, certification, sign-offs proving Parker could actually do the job. I read the policy 3 times, making sure I understood it correctly. Then I made copies, saved them to my personal drive, and said nothing. This wasn't information to use immediately. It was leverage for when timing mattered. Walter thought he'd handed my job away. He'd actually created a transition period where authority was unclear. And that ambiguity was about to matter. The certification requirements were specific. Parker needed documented sign-offs in 8 operational areas within 90 days. Inventory management, logistics coordination, client relationship oversight, compliance adherence, crisis response protocols, vendor relationship management, cross-functional collaboration, strategic planning execution. Each area required demonstration of competency, not just presence. The department heads providing sign-offs had to certify that Parker could perform the functions independently and effectively. Those department heads all reported to different executives. But they all trusted me. I'd built relationships across the organization over 18 years. I'd helped them solve problems, trained their staff, collaborated on initiatives. They knew my work. They'd see Parker's work too, and they'd make their own assessments. I didn't need to sabotage Parker. I just needed to stop covering for him. Stop providing the informal fixes that made operations run smoothly. Stop preventing small mistakes from becoming visible problems. Let Parker operate with the authority Walter had given him. Let him make decisions. Let those decisions have consequences. And let the people responsible for certifying his competency see the results clearly. It wasn't sabotage. It was clarity. Letting reality surface without my usual intervention. The next morning, Parker sent an email announcing a new efficiency initiative, consolidating vendor relationships to simplify procurement and reduce costs. I'd tried the same thing 6 years ago, learned why it didn't work. Our operations needed flexibility that single-source vendors couldn't provide. I documented that lesson, filed it in procurement history. Parker apparently hadn't reviewed it. In the past, I would have stopped this immediately. Called Parker, explained the problem, prevented the mistake. Instead, I replied to his email professionally. Have you reviewed the vendor diversity analysis from 2019? It's in the shared drive under procurement history. Simple. Factual. I'd provided relevant information. What Parker did with it was his decision. He replied quickly, "Thanks, I'll check it out." He didn't. 3 days later, he'd consolidated 2 critical vendors. Within a week, we had supply shortages because our single source couldn't handle a volume spike. Travis from inventory called me directly. "Graham, we're going to miss fulfillment windows. What should I do?" I paused. Escalate to Parker. He's department head. He's not answering. Follow official escalation protocols. Document everything. The shortages triggered client complaints. Walter called a meeting. Walter stood at the front of the conference room, clearly frustrated. What happened with vendor consolidation? Parker explained his efficiency initiative, how he'd streamlined relationships to reduce costs. Walter turned to me. "Why didn't you flag this as a problem?" I mentioned the 2019 analysis in writing. Parker said he'd review it. "You could have pushed harder." I provided information. Parker made the decision. That's how authority works. The room went quiet. Walter's jaw tightened. "I need you working with Parker, not just answering emails." "I am working with him. Within proper channels." "You know what I mean." "I'm not sure I do." Parker is department head. Within days, senior executives started bypassing Parker entirely, calling me directly with operational questions. "Graham, we need input on the Riverside contract renewal." "Graham, can you review these logistics projections?" "Graham, what's your assessment of our vendor situation?" Each time, I provided information professionally, but I also noted that Parker was department head and should be included. That note made the problem more visible. Parker wasn't being bypassed because of conspiracy. He was being bypassed because he couldn't answer questions that leadership needed answered. In a senior meeting, Martin asked Parker about contingency planning for a potential supply disruption. Parker gave a vague answer about monitoring the situation. Martin turned to me. "Graham, what's our actual plan?" I can outline the historical approach, but current planning is Parker's authority. "Just tell us what you'd recommend." This. That depends on how many problems emerge requiring expertise versus just authority. You're making a point. I'm following the structure Walter created. The point is making itself. 2 months in, HR requested a meeting. Carol Webb looked uncomfortable across her desk. "Graham, I need to ask directly. Was your role ever formally transitioned to Parker?" Define formally. Structured handoff. Documentation transfer. Knowledge protocols. Any of that. There was a public announcement. Parker started asking questions. That was it. No formal transition process. None. She made notes. "Were you consulted about the change beforehand?" "I learned about it in the boardroom with everyone else." "And since then, what's your official role?" "Apparently undefined. My previous role was transferred without creating a new one for me." She looked up. "You've had no clear role for 2 months?" "I've been doing my job as I understand it. Nobody's clarified what that is now." "This is a problem." "I agree. I'm recommending a formal review of the transition and current departmental structure." After I left, I felt quiet satisfaction. Not because I was causing problems. Because I was letting organizational reality surface without my intervention. The company was experiencing consequences. And I hadn't sabotaged anything. I just stopped covering for incompetence. The formal review took 2 weeks. HR interviewed department heads, reviewed performance data, examined transition documentation. Their findings were presented to the executive team. Helena told me what happened. Carol basically said the transition was completely mishandled. No formal process. No knowledge transfer. No clear role for you. And Parker hasn't demonstrated required competency. What did Walter say? That Parker needs more support and time. And the executives? Martin asked how much it's costing to operate with unqualified leadership. Carol showed declining metrics over 2 months. Increased errors. Slower response times. Client satisfaction down 8%. Then, they asked if you'd be willing to discuss options. The call came that afternoon. Walter's assistant requesting a meeting tomorrow with Walter and Martin. I accepted calmly. That night, Claire asked if I was nervous. No. They need me more than I need them. What will you ask for? Recognition. Authority. Accountability. From them or for them? Both. The meeting was in Martin's office. Walter sat on the sofa looking tired. Martin got straight to it. Graham, we've reviewed everything. The transition wasn't handled well. It wasn't handled at all, I said. Fair point. We'd like to discuss moving forward productively. I'm listening. We're offering to reinstate you as head of operations, effective immediately. And Parker will be reassigned to a role better suited to his experience. I nodded. Reporting structure? Walter spoke up. Same as before. You'd report to me. No. Both men looked surprised. I won't report to someone who gave my job to his nephew without conversation. Who threatened my future for not being a team player. Who created this through nepotism and poor judgment. Walter's face flushed. That's accurate, I interrupted. If I'm returning, I report to someone who values competence over family connections. Martin was quiet. What are you proposing? I report to you. Same title. Compensation reflecting what I should have earned the past 5 years. Clear authority without interference. That's significant. So was giving my job away publicly. Martin looked at Walter. I'll discuss this with the executive team. Operations will keep declining until qualified leadership is in place. Each week costs money and client trust. How soon could you start if we agree? I never stopped. I know exactly what needs fixing. I left before they could respond. The offer came back within 2 days. Everything I'd asked for. Direct reporting to Martin. Senior Director of Operations title. 28% compensation increase. Clear authority over departmental decisions. And Parker's immediate reassignment. I accepted. My first day back, I walked into operations at 7 in the morning. Helena, Travis, and Denise were already there. Welcome back, Helena said quietly. Let's get to work. We spent the morning reviewing everything broken in 2 months. Client relationships needing repair. Processes changed poorly that needed reverting. Compliance issues requiring attention. By lunch, we had a prioritized plan. By day's end, I'd sent personal communication to every major client. Acknowledging recent inconsistencies. Outlining immediate improvements. Providing my direct contact. Responses came quickly. Relief. Appreciation. Several mentioned they'd been considering alternatives but would give us another chance. One client wrote simply, "Thank God you're back." That evening, Walter appeared at my door. I was still working at 7. Can we talk? About. I owe you an apology. For all of it. Hiring Parker over you. Not discussing it. Handling it publicly. Expecting you to train him without acknowledgement. Threatening your career when you wouldn't cover my mistake. Apology noted. I'm being moved laterally. Different division. Strategic realignment. They're calling it consequences. Yeah. He looked tired. I thought I was helping family. You cost me 18 years of loyalty. You cost the company 2 months of decline. You cost Parker a job he wasn't qualified for. Walter nodded. You didn't sabotage him. I didn't have to. I stopped protecting the company from leadership mistakes. He left without another word. Parker's reassignment was handled quietly. No announcement. Just internal communication that he'd moved to project coordination. Better suited to his experience level. He left the company entirely within 3 months. Found a position somewhere his last name didn't carry expectations he couldn't meet. I didn't celebrate. It was just consequence. Natural result of being appointed to a role he wasn't qualified for. Walter transferred to a regional office. Everyone understood it as demotion. I didn't celebrate that either. Just consequence of nepotism and poor judgment. My focus was rebuilding what had broken. Client relationships. Team confidence. Operational efficiency. Within a month, metrics were recovering. Within 3 months, we'd exceeded previous performance levels. The department was stronger because people understood I'd fought for my role. They'd seen me replaced unjustly. Seen me handle it with precision instead of emotion. Seen me get my authority back on my terms. That mattered to morale. One afternoon, Martin called me to his office. We're creating formal succession planning protocols. After this situation, the board wants clear processes for leadership transitions. Good. I want you to lead development. You understand what happens when transitions are mishandled. On one condition. The process applies to everyone, including family members of executives. No exceptions for nepotism. He smiled. Especially no exceptions for nepotism. We built comprehensive protocols over 3 months. Formal assessment requirements. Competency certifications. Structured knowledge transfer timelines. Transparent evaluation criteria. Everything that should have happened when Parker was appointed. Everything that would have prevented the disaster. Each protocol was documented clearly. No ambiguity. No loopholes for political appointments. The process required formal announcement with 60-day notice. Structured knowledge transfer with documented milestones. Competency assessments from multiple departments. Performance certifications before full authority transfer. Appeal process if assessments raised concerns. The board approved it unanimously. It became company policy, written into governance documents. A year after being publicly replaced, I sat looking at photos from our team event. Helena, Travis, Denise, and 30 others who'd stayed through chaos. People who'd trusted me enough to document honest concerns about Parker. People who'd helped rebuild. My phone buzzed. Text from Claire. Dinner ready when you get home. Proud of you. I smiled. I hadn't burned anything down. Hadn't quit in anger. Hadn't sabotaged. I just stopped covering for incompetence. Let consequences arrive naturally. 6 months after reinstatement, operations was running better than before Parker. Better than before my replacement. Because I had real authority now. Direct reporting to Martin. Budget control. Strategic input. Recognition. I'd spent 18 years being undervalued. That ended the day I watched Parker struggle and chose not to save him. Not from spite. From clarity about responsibility. The insider had been reassigned quietly. My boss had been moved laterally, which everyone understood as consequence. The department had recovered completely. One morning, a new hire asked me about the succession planning protocols. These seem really comprehensive. What inspired them? I thought about how to answer. We learned some expensive lessons about the difference between authority and competence. These protocols ensure we don't repeat those mistakes. What kind of mistakes? The kind where people get appointed to roles they're not qualified for. Where institutional knowledge gets dismissed. Where loyalty gets taken for granted. She nodded, not understanding the full story. That was fine. The protocols would protect her and others. That mattered more than my personal vindication. I'd forced the company to face consequences of poor decisions. Not through sabotage. Through precision. By following exactly the structure they'd created. By letting problems surface instead of covering them. By requiring competency instead of accepting nepotism. A year after Parker's appointment and 6 months after my reinstatement, I sat in my office reviewing quarterly results. Operations performance exceeded targets across all metrics. Client satisfaction was highest in company history. Team retention was strong. The succession protocols I developed were being implemented across other departments. 3 executives had approached me about mentoring their teams. Walter's nephew was gone, working somewhere else, hopefully learning that titles require competence. Walter was at a regional office, probably learning that nepotism has costs. I hadn't destroyed either of them, just stopped protecting them from their own decisions. That night, Claire asked how it felt to have won. I didn't win. I just stopped losing. What's the difference? Winning would have been not getting replaced. What I did was survive the replacement, let incompetence reveal itself, and get my role back on better terms. Sounds like winning to me. Maybe it was. I'd been publicly humiliated. Had my job handed to an unqualified insider. Been threatened when I wouldn't train him. And I'd responded not with anger but with precision. Let them feel consequences. Let problems surface. Let reality speak. The department recovered. The insider left. My boss faced consequences. And I got authority that matched my expertise. Sometimes the most powerful response to injustice isn't fighting the decision. It's letting people experience what they've lost. Walter thought he could replace me and everything would continue because I'd keep fixing things quietly. He was wrong. And that mistake cost him. I didn't burn it down. I just stopped holding it together. And watched it crack on its own.